And we're back, and we're going to talk about the economics of housing. And with us is Ryan McMaken from the Mises Institute. How are you, Ryan?
I'm very well, thank you.
All right. First off, you work for the Mises Institute, is actually short for Ludwig von Mises. Tell us who Ludwig von Mises is and was, and what does the Mises Institute do?
Well, Mises was an economist from Austria, and
this is this dreaded Austrian school of economics, right?
Right.
Not Australians.
Yes,
although,
not to be confused with the Australian school, if that exists, I don't know. And he was from Austria. He came to the United States, and he's really responsible, probably more so than anyone else, except maybe the slightly better known Friedrich Hayek, for bringing Austrian economics to the English-speaking world, and specifically to the United States. People know Mises' student, Hayek, a little bit better. Hayek won the Nobel Prize, which that doesn't mean anything to me. Lots of hacks get the Nobel Prize, but it did bring him some notoriety. So he's generally the best known of the Austrian economists. But Mises was Hayek's teacher, and really is the one that developed most of what Hayek is known for today, and which Hayek would have freely admitted. And so he died in 1973 at the age of 90-something. So he had been present in really developing a lot of economic theory in the 20s and 30s. And he's perhaps best known for a book called Human Action, which is a very long, thick economics book. But he also has some great books. One's called Socialism, another's called Liberalism. And when Mises talked about liberalism, he meant the ideology of laissez-faire and free markets.
Right. Classical liberalism,
exactly.
not today's contemporary term.
Right. And so he grew up in this world of liberalism in the late 19th century in Europe, where Europe was thinking about this whole issue of free markets. And that was a new thing in Europe at that time and in the early 20th century. And so Mises was kind of at the forefront. He was a government official in Austria for a while and was at the forefront of trying to prevent the hyperinflation that occurred in Austria, try to take action to prevent World War I to the extent that he could. He was too young at the time to really do anything about it. But it came to the United States, though, and became obscure because by the 1940s and 50s, free market economics was totally out of fashion. And people had embraced Keynesian ideology, Franklin Roosevelt's ideology, all of that. And he really only started to experience a renaissance in the 70s, 80s, and today. So he's far better known now, really, today than he was 50 years ago.
Sure, and Hayek and Mises, they're all very well known within the free market circles.
Right.
There's more think tanks than ever before, and there's more people working on free market issues. And there's actually free market, there's also Austrian economics being taught at colleges now, for goodness sakes. I mean,
oh, yes.
In small local colleges, CU Boulder and Metro.
Well, I became familiar with it going to University of Colorado. We had a professor there named Fred Glehy, who was in thought in Austrian, and had exposed me to the thinking of Mises. So, yeah, just depending on where you go, which program you go into, you might encounter some Austrians. Not every Austrian is a big political activist type, and that really kind of gets at the heart of what the Mises Institute is about. Is we're not a political activist organization. It's a research center. We don't lobby for specific legislation.
You wear green eye shades
like
and you do PhD work, and you look at economics, right?
Yes, it's very high-level stuff.
High-level cogitation, as we like to call it.
However, I'm in charge of the low-level stuff, because yes, we have faculty, we have PhDs who do very complex economics research. But I'm the one who's supposed to
simplify it
produce,
for people like me.
We produce daily articles for normal people.
And that would be at Mises.org.
That's correct. Yes, every day new articles.
And for people who don't follow this kind of thing, there's actually been a long-term and ongoing battle between the Austrian school and the Keynesian school of economics, and it's still ongoing. In fact, they do these fun debates, you know, Hayek versus Keynes, et cetera, right? All right. So. Your prior iteration, you were actually an economist at the Colorado Division of Housing, correct? And I've been told that housing economists are like the Rolling Stones of economists, that you get all the groupies and you pack the big venues. Is that right?
We do get a lot of attention when the economy tanks, or when there's a lot of foreclosures, or when housing prices are going up very quickly.
So I have one question for you. Why the hell did my house cost so much in Denver?
Because there were a lot of people who wanted to buy your house, and there weren't many houses like it, is the short answer.
That's beautiful. Okay, we can go. No, all right. No, in all seriousness, we've been watching over the contemporary here in Denver recent years that housing prices have been rising fairly dramatically relative to other parts of the country. Not necessarily relative to other cities, say like a Seattle or a Portland, which are also rising. But if you go to the Rust Belt or if you go down south, Denver housing prices have really skyrocketed, but which wouldn't be a problem if incomes were rising at the same level as the housing prices, but that's not happening necessarily, right? We're seeing housing increases outstripping median incomes, which is in turn putting a lot of people out of the housing market. Is that a fair way to put it?
Correct.
Can I write for Mises?
Absolutely. They send me 1,200 words immediately. The issue is that home prices are rising faster than incomes. That's the only time you would need to worry, really, is if there's so much demand for housing that the prices are going up quickly, but you're not producing enough housing and incomes aren't going up enough to really match those increases in home prices. And that's what we're experiencing in a lot of places. Now, that wasn't the case back in, say, 2005. In fact, if we look at rents in real terms and adjust them for inflation, especially here in Colorado, but it was also true in many parts of the country, rents were actually going down. And there was so much home price production as well, even though there was home price inflation at that time. It wasn't rampant and it wasn't necessarily outpacing income growth in many places. But after the financial crisis of 2008, you saw new home production really just disappear, and you also didn't see incomes continue to go up at the rate they had. So it's a totally different situation now from what it was, say, 10 years ago. It wasn't, even though there was a housing bubble and home prices were increasing quickly, there was a lot of housing available to people, and it wasn't a problem in the way it is now. And so people are looking out there, they're seeing, say, 10% increases in home prices here, or in rental prices here in the Metro Denver area, but they're not seeing income growth anywhere near on that same level. And you're seeing a similar thing with home prices. So as long as you've got home prices going up much more quickly than incomes, then you really do have an affordability problem. And you got to try to figure out, how do we deal with that?
That leads us into what I really want to get to, which is this idea of affordable housing. And we're seeing a big push. It's a big push all over the Front Range, clearly. And Denver is going on they just passed an ordinance, an affordable housing ordinance, but that's the wrong term, right? We're not talking about affordable housing, we're talking about subsidized housing. Because affordable housing, I can afford the house I live in now, but when the house 3 doors down went on the market, there's no possible way I could have purchased it. So my house is affordable to me. That house was not affordable to me. So affordable housing is a relative term to what you can afford. So what we should be calling it is subsidized housing. Is that
right?
accurate?
For the purposes of this discussion, we should only refer to subsidized housing as subsidized housing.
Not that we get to control that it's called that, because we don't get to control language, but everyone's calling it affordable housing, when in reality affordable housing is simply a broader term that means broadly affordable housing in a market.
Right,
there's lots of people who live in that market.
There's plenty of affordable housing in pockets, in neighborhoods throughout America that aren't subsidized, but that's not what we're talking about.
Right, so now what's the problem with subsidizing housing for people who have been left behind as the prices have gone up, but their income has not gone up to match it? What does that do to the market, the broader market for housing here in Denver?
Well, in the broadest sense, anytime that you're engaging in government spending on something, anything, not just housing, it distorts the market in the sense that if you put government in the position where it's going to buy more housing or subsidize more housing, that's going to drive up the cost of the subsidized product for somebody. Now, and the same is true of higher education. We subsidize college education, and
tuition goes up.
And tuition goes up because since it's subsidized for some people, those people now demand more of it. And so those sorts of distortions are just common anytime there's government spending. And anything that government spends money on is just the price is going to go up because more government demand leads to more demand for that product. So government buys a bunch of steel, the price of steel is going to go up. And this just happens with anything that government spends on. So government spending just in itself is its own problem. But if we're going to talk about housing in particular, we just need to take a look and see where's that money coming from, who is actually paying for this subsidy, and are the people who are benefiting from it paying for it? When we look at affordable housing or subsidized housing, what we find really is that we can trace it all back to government interventions in the marketplace, because there are so many limitations on what you can build, where you can build, how you can build, that drives up the price of housing considerably, because it both constrains the supply and also constrains the different types of housing that you can build. So of course then you're going to have fewer affordable units.
So what's our alternative here in Denver or in the Denver metro area if we don't want to? There's no possible way that I see that the government could possibly build enough subsidized housing to meet the demand for lower priced housing. So what's an alternative?
Right. The issue with affordable housing is it's just a little bit here and there. Look,
few people benefit.
Right.
Doesn't really help the broader affordable housing issue.
And you can see even there that we want to subsidize just enough units that we can get enough firemen or waitresses or so on to live in this neighborhood, and then we don't have to increase their wages.
There's a lot of, this is actually almost a wage subsidy, because if you're an employer and people are having a hard time affording an apartment here, if the government gives them a place to live, you don't have to raise wages, even if there's pressure on those wages, right?
Right, and it's no shock that you see the most, or the biggest calls for subsidies, the largest subsidies in places like Aspen,
sure,
where you've got two groups of people. You got millionaires, and then you got the people who serve the millionaires. And the millionaires don't want the people who serve them to just build their own housing, or we can't just sell those people land, right? And they can't. We don't want them to leave either. So we'll build them special units that they can live in.
All right. Well, thanks very much, Ryan. We're actually out of town. Check us out at independenceinstitute.org. Man, that went fast.
Okay.
Good stuff. Okay.